What's up, Patreon family? This is your girl Megan from the HoodAstroQ, here to do another celebrity natal chart reading. So this one is long overdue. Okay, this story is kind of old, but I still wanted to cover it just because of how interesting it was from an astrological standpoint. So the former Raiders receiver Henry Ruggs was involved in a fatal fiery car crash back in November. Okay, so apparently, what happened was he was driving under the influence. He was riding in the car with his girlfriend, and I think he even clocked his car out at 156 miles per hour or some ridiculous speed like that before crashing into another vehicle that contained a woman and her dog. The car exploded, meaning the other woman's car exploded, and unfortunately, she perished. Her and her dog perished in the fiery crash. And if I'm not mistaken, there was some clips of like Henry and his girlfriend on social media. I think they posted videos of like the car accident, and it just became a huge thing, right? He was arrested and he bonded out, but I think he's still supposed to go on trial because this is a serious situation, So my heart goes out to that young lady and her family because drunk driving is real, and that just has to be a horrible way to go. So I, of course, always was like, okay, well, I would be kind of interested in seeing what was going on in Henry's natal chart just to even create an environment where he could be capable of something like that. And yeah, so I have it here and I want to talk about it. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So Henry was born January 24th, 1999 in Montgomery, Alabama. Now, the time of birth that I use here is a placeholder because there is no known time of birth available on the internet for him. So, to my findings anyway. But per usual, if y'all find something different, always feel free to drop it in the comment section. However, we can still deduce that his sun is at the 4th degree of Aquarius, which actually gives him like this double dose of Aquarian energy. He actually has a lot of Aquarian energy, to be exact, because he also has this stellium, right? This Aquarius stellium that includes his sun, Uranus, Neptune, Venus, and South Node. Aquarius is one of those signs in and of itself that can deal with accidents. So can the number 4, because the number 4 is ruled by Uranus. His sun conjoined to Uranus as well could also produce a person who is very accident prone. And that number 12 is a very unfortunate number because it does deal with accidents, but also victimhood, sacrifice, death, right? So right off rip, it was kind of a interesting little combination here. Then he has his sun as well as his Mercury conjoined to Neptune, which is another really big red flag in terms of a person who may very well have addiction problems, right? And I remember the reports actually stated that he was inebriated. He was arrested because his blood alcohol level was exponentially over the legal limit. So once again, we're talking about a drunk driving incident. Mercury in conjunction to Neptune, to be exact. I see this in the charts of a lot of people who can get hemmed up when we talk about DUIs, okay? Mercury does deal with cars. So a lot of these people, if they're not careful, they find themselves at risk for things like driving drunk, but also things like falling asleep behind the wheel, right? Or taking some type of medication that could inebriate them, and now they've lost their abilities to, operate a vehicle. So it can be dangerous in that respect. Or these are people who could just naturally be the types to not pay attention while they're on the road. So this could be a serious issue here. In addition to that, Aquarians, especially with him being an Aquarius sun, Uranus, once again, South Node, even Venus, these are people who can be very erratic, okay? Very erratic people. Even if you want to throw that Neptune in Aquarius there. They are people who are really unpredictable. And another way you could kind of look at this is with his Neptune at that 1st degree of Aquarius in conjunction of Mercury. This could be someone who, through the use of alcohol, that's kind of when their unpredictable kind of factor to their personality really jumps out. So that was something else that I was like, okay, it's kind of starting to make sense now. Not to mention, he also has some other key indicators of substance abuse, which could have contributed to him even being drunk behind the wheel in the first place, such as Neptune squaring his moon. Okay, moon in negative aspects to Neptune in general, I find can make it really hard for a person who has some type of addiction problem. These are people who have addictive personalities. So there's that. And then in addition to that, he has his moon. And of course, we can take this moon placement with a grain of salt because we don't know his exact time of birth. But I still have a strong suspicion that his moon is forming a conjunction to that Saturn in Aries. Now, this could produce a person who is a daredevil. Okay, this is essentially a daredevil aspect, or a person who really just lacks control, right? These are people who lacks a certain level of control over themselves, and as a result, they can be a liability. They can be very, very dangerous. In fact, Saturn in Aries in general, which is of course a generational placement, but a lot of people from this generation have karmic kind of connections to things that could cause them pain, or they can find themselves in situations where they can bring a lot of pain on themselves. And this could be physically, right? This could be a person, depending on how it's aspected, who is a hothead. Next thing you know, they got into a fight and I don't know, somebody cut them or something like that, right? These are people who can sustain injuries, lacerations, cuts, burns, bruises to the skin. But also, okay, his Saturn is actually at the Aries degree. The number 27 actually reduces to 9. And the number 27 could also even deal with like drunkenness, also, especially because of that 7 effect, or someone who has just very little impulse control. His Mercury is also at the 27th degree, and his Mercury is squaring that Saturn. So literally, you could look at that square as the main factor being responsible for that car accident. So a person who quite literally could find themselves in a fiery car crash, right? Saturn in Aries can produce fire, burns. So maybe he walked away with a couple burns, cuts, and bruises. But unfortunately, we already know the other woman did as well. So, that has a lot to do with it. These are people who can, break bones. So I wouldn't be surprised if he broke a bone or two during the incident. With Mercury dealing with our lungs, these are people who can puncture a lung, right? With Mercury squaring Saturn in Aries. But moreover, these are people who can kind of take their daredevilish mentality and apply it to, how they drive. So yes, this could also be a byproduct of drunk driving, but Mercury squaring Saturn in Aries could be a person who has a need for speed. Okay. And so, mind you, according to reports, the man was going at like 156 miles an hour upon the time of impact. His Saturn is also squaring Neptune, which could be a huge indicator in terms of him being inebriated, or where this kind of reckless nature of his personality once again tends to reveal itself when he's under the influence, right? Where he just has no self-control whatsoever. It's also opposing his Mars, okay, which just so happens to be at the 29th degree of Libra. That number 29 could also be a very challenging number. In terms of just dealing with someone who's liable to undergo extremes. So this Mars in opposition to Saturn, you can even look at this as this resulting in a serious court case. There being ongoing litigation. He has Mars squaring Neptune. That's another aspect that doesn't look too good in terms of a person who's dealing with addiction. But like I said, also a person who just has no control, a lack of willpower. Same thing for Sun in conjunction to Neptune. Not to mention all of these Neptune aspects that are happening here. It could deal with him going to jail, obviously. And especially if they hand him a very heavy sentence for this accident, I could definitely see it. He has all the quintessential indicators of a person who could mess around and spend quite some time in prison, or or maybe he needs rehab. Okay, he needs some serious rehabilitation, which is another way you could kind of look at Neptune adversely aspect, especially when we talk about the moon, right? Moon squaring Neptune. I personally would recommend that he, finds himself in some type of, you know, environment, rehabilitation environment, assisted living environment where they're able to treat him for his addiction, because he definitely has some addiction problems. Then he has Jupiter and Pisces, which is another generational placement to an extent, but it is forming a semi-square to Uranus. And the fact that Uranus plays such a strong role in his chart, especially with that conjunction to his sun, it could just deal with a person who may get very belligerent, or who is very accident prone. Once again, especially when they are inebriated. He has his Mars square Mercury. That could be another dangerous driver aspect. It could deal with a person who takes a lot of risks, while driving, while behind the wheel, or a person who's driving like they're the only ones on the road. So essentially, the main crux of this situation, it really does boil down to this T-square he has going on between his Mars, Sun, Neptune, Moon, and Saturn, right? He has a T-square, a mean-ass T-square that, could absolutely lead somebody in a situation like this. Now, from an asteroid standpoint, I couldn't help but notice that he has his, the asteroid Icarus, which deals with, accidents as well. It deals with where we just are reckless, careless, or we can make really destructive kind of risks unnecessarily, or take destructive risks, I should say. Icarus is conjoined to his Mercury. Once again, Mercury dealing with cars and the way one navigates and operates behind the wheel. Where his downfall is being somebody who feels like he's invincible once he steps inside of a vehicle. He may also have mental problems as well, which, I'm kind of picking the vibes up from just even looking at his chart in totality. And I'm pretty sure that may have factored in to a certain extent. Now, taking a look at the transits of that night, apparently this accident occurred November 3rd. The number 3 can even be accident prone as well, so I thought that was pretty interesting. The transiting ascendant at the time was at the 12th degree of Sagittarius. Once again, the number 12 dealing with sacrifice, and then Sagittarius also being one of those signs that could deal with an accident occurring, especially like on a highway or on the interstate. He also had his natal Chiron forming in opposition to transiting North Node, that Gemini North Node, which could deal with sustaining an injury during a car accident, right? So there's that. That's another really big telltale sign of being in a car accident, a serious car accident at that. Transiting Jupiter, which was at the 22nd degree of Aquarius, that number 22 also deals with accidents, but it was conjoined to his South Node. So this could also deal with some type of fated accident occurring. It could also even increase the likelihood of a person getting in trouble with the law as well. Not to mention, he was also undergoing a Uranus square Uranus transit. So transiting Uranus, squaring his natal Uranus, another really big accident, aspect, especially when we talk about like transit wise, where unpredictable things could kind of just pop off, or unexpected things could happen, or things that kind of throw you off your rocker. So, or where there could be really careless mistakes, or that you could make that could lead to other things, unexpected circumstances, things that literally nobody may have been able to predict. So it's everywhere. It's really everywhere. Transiting Mars, squaring Neptune, that could also deal with him being inebriated, under the influence, even to the point where he was outside of his body, especially with transiting Mars being at the 2nd degree of Scorpio at the time, right? Where he could have went into like a, psychosis induced state. And then the following day, transiting Mercury was opposing his Saturn. And then a few days after that, transiting Mercury was conjoined to his Mars. He wasn't too far out from the Mercury square Mercury transit as well. I think that may have been the day prior. Also, transiting Mercury was forming a quincunx to his natal Jupiter, okay, in Pisces, which is also a telltale sign of an accident, a car accident, or once again, him being inebriated or making poor decisions, having his judgment impaired due to alcohol, right? And something happening behind the wheel. So it's all over the place, like I said before. I just thought it was kind of interesting. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. But, I mean, the fact that somebody died, like, dude is going to jail, but he really needs some serious help. Because there's something deeper at play that's going on with him. So with that being said, y'all drop down in the comment section. Let me know what did y'all think about this whole situation. And I will catch y'all in the next video. Bye.